So we are waiting for the audience to join. We are on time.
Okay.
Why I cannot see your video? Let me check. I can see it here.
You see my video? Because I can see.
Okay, so we do have now session started and we have audience coming. So let me introduce you. So we have the next session with Mr. Pradeep Shah, and he has over 30 years of experience in technology and business. Pradeep's career started with Texas Instrument as an elite first batch of employee that sparkled the IT revolution in India. And his career spans across different technologies like EDA, electronic design automation, compilers, UI, embedded Linux, e-commerce, and now managed hosting. And Mr. Pradeep holds a patent and has a master degree in computer science from IIT Madras. And today he's going to speak about how to better code for a faster website. And I'm thankful to Mr. Pradeep for joining Magento for the last couple of years. And it's over to you, sir. You can now.
Thanks, Shakti, for the good words. Yeah. And welcome, everybody. I'll be talking today about better code for faster website. Um, so I always use an analogy of car speed and website performance. The analogy basically says that an engine is like the CPU or memory. So you have a better engine, better CPU, and faster memory, faster CPU, you'll go faster. You need better transmission, which is synonymous with peripherals, disk, and network. So until you don't have good disk speed, good network speed, you will not get the performance you're looking for. And the third that I always refer to is better fuel is equal to better code. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get there, also wanted to highlight the difference between scale, scaling a website and performance. So scaling a website is like building a highway, while the performance of a single hit is generally like how fast you can drive your car. So the basic premise is this: you cannot make a single hit go any faster by adding more CPU, right? Let's assume you're already on the top CPU of the world today, and you have all your hardware good. Now the only thing that you can really do is do some performance tuning to get more speed on your single hit. The topic is better code for faster website. Also, I just added the slide in. Hashid during his keynote speech put in levers, and the number one lever he talked about was load time, and he elaborated that you need to have good code. So yeah, and it's not easy. There's some hard work involved. So that's why I always say that there's no silver bullet. There's no magic wand that you can just say my site can get faster. But before we get there, one more thing. Don't tell me about varnish. Yeah, if a lot of people come back and say, hey, why is my site not performing? I already have varnish, right? If varnish was good enough, you would not need things like AWS Autoscale or the Adobe Commerce Cloud Pro plan, right? And Fastly, which has a varnish on Edge as a CDN, would have probably been the king of the Magento market. There would be no need for any hosting. So let's talk about two things. One is what happens to a hit, what happens to something that doesn't return directly from varnish, but has to get it from PHP. And the other is like what happens to your on-site on-page feed performance. Let's start with the results, right? So we as a business help customers with performance, and one of the aspects of that is we help merchants and their developers understand performance of their PHP code. This shows how we help a customer reduce almost a significant amount of CPU on a busy website by making change to 10 lines of code, right? There were other implications. Obviously, the site speed improved as well, but just how improving your code will actually reduce CPU utilization. Another result, this time it's from our dashboard, which shows the number of hits per minute as well as the average response time for per minute. So what we do is we basically calculate on a real-time basis the number of hits that came in the last minute and how long did Magento take to respond. We don't consider static content. It's just the Magento hits. And as you can see over here, the black, which is the average response time per minute, is significantly lower after what was actually a one-line change, right? And this one-line change was for developers, disabling an observer, which wasn't actually being used, but was just consuming CPU. So, these are taken on the before and after. The before was sometime in December. The site traffic was slightly higher, but it's pretty evident, when before there was hardly any hit that took less than a second, we now have most of the hits being returned in less than a second. Yeah. So what would be my top 5 recommendations? The first would be to review plugins periodically. We continuously see customers having plugins that are not used, but they're there, right? Suggest actually doing a zero budgeting at least once a year to find out what plugins need to be dropped. The other one is very similar but slightly different, which is remove functionality. I mean, actually go into plugins and remove code, right? Like we removed the observer in that plugin earlier. Actually go and remove code, and you will find that there's a lot of wasted code which has never been used. The other thing is watch the volumes of your logs written, right? As you can see, this particular case I've taken has like system and exception log exceeding 2 GB. This actually slows down, because in the way PHP works is it actually opens the file, goes to the end, and then writes. And as the file gets larger, the inodes get more, and the amount of time it takes to go to the end of the file increases. So you'll actually see a slowdown. If you have NFS, even worse, right? I also suggest always to use crons and RabbitMQ for developers to take processes and offload them, so that you're not actually processing what's not needed to be processed as a single hit. Yeah. The other thing is I would always suggest is to remove curl calls, right? As you can see in this particular code segment, the browser is actually some sort of curl eventually, some get post or whatever will happen. Look for this code and try and figure out why it's happening and remove that. Yeah. I like the curl so much that I made a full slide for it. So let's assume your user comes into category page. You send out a curl call to reviews to get some reviews of your products, right? And reviews could perhaps be down, could be rate limiting because your site has got busy. And as a result, your user is yet waiting for the category page to come back. What are the better options in this particular case? Use AJAX calls to the review site so that, let's assume that you have license from your server. So you could AJAX into your server and then curl, or better still would be to store the reviews in a table, have a cron job running periodically, going and getting the reviews and storing them. So they're in sort of your cache and you serve from your cache. Let's look at some tools that we use. There are some very simple tools available, right? So one tool we use very often is the PHP FPM, core PHP FPM. I can change the way the access log looks to give me information. So giving you a sample over here, it's taken like 50 seconds to finish this hit, and it's consumed 46% CPU, which means 46% of the time PHP code was running, and the remaining 54% of the time there was some MySQL, some curl happening. In this particular case, we know it was some MySQL happening. And so obviously there were both code and database issues which need to be fixed. Okay, So if a category page takes, let's say, 7 seconds and has a low CPU percentage, then you're looking for MySQL and seeing how you can optimize. Let's just step a little bit deeper into this kind of analysis, right? So if CPU percentage is high, then you're looking for some PHP code. The way you can improve some PHP code is, for example, improve MySQL queries. You could limit the attributes that you want. You could limit the count. We've seen code where a collection is, got into an array, and then it looks only for the first 3 items. You're better off making a query with just 3 items and then looping through. There are times when MySQL is better at processing some stuff. So offload to MySQL, right? The other thing is, you can avoid multiple similar queries. So we see Google Tag Manager as well as the main category looping through similar content, not exactly the same similar collection. And these are two separate queries, two separate processing. Again, causes a problem. The third one is look for order n raised to x loops. Generally look for a for within a for. So we'll look at some more details later, right? The other PHP FPM tool we use is slow logs. Slow logs basically gives you a stack trace at a specific timeout. So what we do is we vary the timeout, make multiple observations, and then present it to a customer. And for example, this particular one, is the same one where we removed one line, and this was the observer. The observer was a product load after observer, and that came in the category page. And the moment the customer had bundled products in a category page, a hit like this would take 40 or 50 seconds because it was just doing nonsensical work. Yeah. So the favorite, and whenever you get back to your plugin vendor, the plugin vendor is going to say, my plugin is used in thousands of websites around the world. My simple answer to that is, yeah, that's true, which is why Magento worldwide is known to be a little bit slow. Yeah. So our experience with plugin vendors is vendor reputation has no connection with code quality, especially when it comes to speed. Code quality a lot of times is defined as functionally correct. Merchants evaluate functional feature. They don't necessarily evaluate code speed. And Adobe's checks for qualifying merchants do not touch this aspect of code quality. So it's all it's fine to say we've taken the best vendor, but it's always good to look at their code and clean it up. Okay. The other aspect is page speed, which is the on-page speed performance, right? Some other types of code comes in, and let's look at those as well. Why is it important? Google is going to use the core Web Vitals as it defines for search ranking beginning May 2021. So I guess every merchant is coming back asking for improving the Web Vitals, right? The Google Search Console has been enhanced to show the Web Vitals over a period of time. So that helps you make experiments and see how your results have changed. Yeah. So what are Web Vitals? Web Vitals has basically three things: the largest contentful paint, which basically means when the most amount of display got done. The first input display, that is first input delay, which is how early can you get your visitor to start interacting with your screen. And the third is CLS, which is the cumulative layout shift. Typically, if you have a font and the font loads later, and when that font loads, your screen sort of shifts, or you have a JavaScript that inserts something at the top. Those are the kind of things that hurt performance, right? So how do I improve the largest contentful paint, right? So Magento comes with merge CS and JSS. Avoid that. It actually even comes with its own default bundling. I would say avoid that as well. But do enable JS and CSS minification, and use some advanced bundling such as Magepack or Magento Advanced JavaScript bundling, which requires a little bit of time to set up, understand, and then implement. Then the other most favorite thing is all marketing people want their JavaScripts in the header, but they should really be in the footer. And then also optimize images. So let's look at marketing JS in the header or footer. Again, back to my plugin vendors, Facebook pixel remarketing. Well, what's the point of putting in the body start? It should be probably in the footer container. So go make some code change, simple code change, one-line code changes, which will help improve your performance. Optimize images. Chrome and other browsers can be served with more optimal images. Image optimization technology is very simple. Almost everybody uses the same backend technology with Image Magic or something like that. But the big question is, how do you make it work with CDN? So there are really two solutions. One is in code, go make change to use some picture tags so that it loads the correct type of image for the correct type of screen. Or you can use image optimization services, which do come with some plugins and some automated stuff, which improves the quality of the size of the images served without disturbing the quality. So I mentioned three of them here: Gumlet, Image Engine, and ImageKit.io. We are in Meet Magento India. There are many other providers of image services. I just mentioned these because these are all having some sort of an Indian origin. Looking at cumulative layout shift, it has only 5% weightage on the Lighthouse score, but don't get fooled. It's part of Web Vitals, so you better fix that. The number one reason we see is font changes. You need a font, but you loaded the font later. You should probably do a preload and make sure that the font loads upfront. Obviously, don't use too many fonts because the font loading is going to slow down your site. So and add content using JavaScript without first reserving space, right? And that's another reason why some things like this happen. Reserve some space and then use JavaScript to fill in the gaps, right? Okay. You can always use the screenshot mode in Lighthouse to see how your screen develops and observe the shifts, right? The other part of Web Vital is first input delay. Again, code related stuff here. Eliminate render blocking resources. Almost every Magento website I've seen has too many render blocking resources. Some coding is needed to move things around. So be conscious. As developers develop, they need to start thinking. At the start of the project, how to do these things, right? Some plugins are available, such as the Cloudflare Rocket Loader, which tries to move JavaScript to the bottom of the page, but sometimes they don't necessarily work. So having some developer look into it would always be good. Yeah. And don't optimize in isolation. Don't try to optimize everything. See real traffic, right? Check Google Search Console, what it's showing, what type of pages. It actually tells you what pages are accessed most often and slow. Perform some sort of bottleneck analysis. Find the critical things that need attention first. And as I always say, be a student. It's a new field. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot of reading to be done. Especially with the Google stuff, right? Yeah. And that brings me to the end of my talk. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Hey, Shakti?
Thank you, Mr. Pradeep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me check the questions.
So while you look for some questions, I have some bonus content. We did some more slow log analysis of some marketing tags, right? And beakitting is it helps you understand your customers better by tracking them. And guess what they do? They give you a plugin which, well, unfortunately slows down your website, right? So yeah, Shakti, any questions in the meanwhile?
Question like sometime default Magento queries flowing into slow query. So what could be the reason for that?
Yeah, I mean, that unfortunately, I mean, if you say default Magento, well, yeah, there are some issues in default Magento which may need some tuning. Keep up to date with Magento versions. But how many people have default Magentos? There are so many plugins being added. Just look. It may look like, if you look at a stack trace, it might look like it comes through default Magento. Just go down and have a look at why even that code is getting called. So. Like, for example, one of the previous examples that I showed you, look like default Magento at first, and it's just doing a SQL query, right? And you go down and see the last line, and that's where the hint comes, which is like, hey, Mage Plaza is trying to do a product load after, right? And yeah, it's a legal Magento query using default Magento code, but it should not get called in the first place. So yeah, analyze a little bit more.
Yeah. And someone asked like we need a real example of speed optimization in Magento. So
Yeah, I
maybe
mean, so this is a real life example. The examples I showed you are real life examples, right?
okay.
They're real valid websites with a lot of traffic, right? And
And
so yeah, so
there is
come to us, talk to us. We can tell you how you can optimize your site.
I was saying that in that case they can talk to you
Yeah,
one to one. And there is one
absolutely.
more question like by using all these things, what is the best score we can achieve with the default Magento?
That's $1 million question. I think the other day I saw a LinkedIn post where someone said that I did these things that I got 100% score. But that's a big question, right? I mean, what is default Magento, right? I mean, why should you optimize Luma, for example, right? There's PWA today. There's a lot of stuff. So in fact, if you go down to Google's website, Google actually tells you don't. I think I have one bonus slide somewhere which I can show, right? So this is what Google talks about the myths of site performance. User experience cannot be captured in a single metric. So don't bother about the matrix of those numbers, right? It's the user experience that you need to bother about. Okay. The other thing is user experience can people think that user experience can be captured with a single representative user. No, people are using all types of devices, so you know what you're trying to optimize for. The myth number 3 is that my website loads fast for me, so it should load fast for all my users. It's like a developer saying, this code works for me on my local environment, so it should work in production, right? So these 3 myths, if you remember, you'd probably not be asking a question saying, how do I get that number better, right? You need to bother about user experience.
And we have one more question I'm taking because of time, that where can we add Google marketing in FB marketing tags, because it is taking too much time to load and it's a third
Yeah.
party JS. And we have experienced that when we have third parties, JS, we cannot do much with that. So
No, but I did show, right? I mean, there was some change we did for a customer, right? Yeah, and there was a slide that I had which showed that, right? We moved it to the footer, right? So it's coming from the plugin, change the plugin code, move it down to the footer. Also, you can use the trick that that is used by Cloudflare. What they do is they actually write a JavaScript which loads up front, and then make sure that the other JavaScripts don't load until that JavaScript is loaded, right? So that's another thing. Of course, bundling also helps, right? So you can make sure you bundle and then make sure that one of the bundles is loaded at the end, right? So yeah, so Magento 2 uses required JS. Required JS gives a lot of flexibility in the way you can bundle things. There's no easy picking, but there are things you can do. You cannot just say, oh, it's a marketing plugin, I can't do anything with it. Yeah, any other question, Shakti?
yeah, I posted Google page speed still does not score well. What would be the reason behind that?
Yeah, there can be many reasons, right? I hope it was a simple answer, right? Yeah, analyze. That's the thing. You may have some JavaScript which is not being used. You may have fonts, right? It's not an easy thing, right? Which is why I said there's no silver bullet, right? So you need to keep working on it, nibbling at it, saying, oh, if I do this, that happens. There's a whole series of experiments you need to run before you get this winning combination that's good for you.
Yeah. And I want to say again, thank you for the very insightful session on the performance, because the performance is very critical part of any e-commerce website, and we have been one of our client is facing issue, and he has shared some insight on the web vitals that you have covered. So I'm sure I will, go through this session again with my team to make sure we
Sure.
implement some of the practice that you have shared.
Yeah.
And this is really helpful. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Right.
Thank
Thanks a lot.
you.
Thanks a lot, everybody, for attending. And you can message me if you need any, if you have any questions about this or anything about hosting. Right. Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.